We're good? Okay. Hi, everybody. So it's 12:30, so I'm going to start right on time. So this is Aidyn. I'm not sure if I've ever said your last name. Baloun. Okay. And so she's doing an honors project that's centered around painting and mythology and connecting those two together while trying to honor ancient histories from these different people. So if you don't know, so Aidyn is a studio arts major, and she also has two minors, one in business administration and one in photography. And so to make sure we can stay on time, I'm going to let Aidyn take it away, but also I'm going to present you with your glorious honors code. And so there you go. Congratulations.
Honors code. Alright, so as she said, this is Painting Myths, Understanding and Honoring Ancient Narratives Through Visual Art. The goal of this series of works was to depict myths from different civilizations in a respectful and historically accurate way. My first painting is the Lupercal, and the Lupercal is about the twins Romulus and Remus, who were abandoned by the king at the edge of the Tiber River in a basket to drown. Their basket was then floated to a wolf den where a wolf cared for them before they got adopted by a shepherd. Romulus went on to found Rome, near the spot where they had washed up, and ancient Romans actually called this spot the Lupercal, which is why it's the title. And wolves were actually very sacred to Romans because that was their origin story essentially, and the wolf was everything that Romans aspired to be, fierce and protective. And that's where this statue comes in, because it was made by an Etruscan artist, the civilization that slightly predates the Romans, and it was to commemorate the birth of Rome. This is my in progress, and my in progress slides are going to go my research, what went right, and what went interesting. So the research, knowing that there's an actual location to this place made the research a little bit funky because they have an actual location, but the place they think it is has been converted into a very stylized religious area for the ancient Romans. So when they uncovered it, they were like, if this was the ancient cave, it sure doesn't look how like it probably did when Romulus and Remus were there. So I had to take a little bit of artistic liberty and create my own cave, which was a very fun process. I started off with a very kind of deeper color for the cave, and then it got lighter as I went on. And oil paint is perfect for layering everything so that the colors can kind of blend together and you get amazing textures. So another part of the research was that an Italian wolf is not the same thing as a normal North American wolf. The Italian wolf has a rounder skull and smaller teeth, and about 55 to 75 pounds is what they are. They were apparently endangered at one point as well, fun fact. So what went right in this painting was I was lucky enough to have a skin color oil paint. That's the handiest thing in the universe. And so since I had the skin color paint, the infants went really fast. As you can see in the middle picture, they weren't necessarily the most proportionate things at the beginning, but we soon got it down and they looked a lot better by the time I was done. The textures went fantastic as well. Once again, oil paint is the best thing for textures. I managed to get beautiful rock and moss textures from multiple layers of paints and colors and stuff like that. And what went interesting was the fur. I'd never done fur on a large scale before, so this was definitely a very interesting process for me. I ended up using a fan brush, which is a kind of large and fanned out brush that really helped cover the space and increase the amount of volume I could cover in the fur. It gave me wonderful textures as well. And here is the finished product. As you can see, the fur is there, the texture is there, and then I went in this semester and actually added some little cracks and stuff. So that also helped finish out the painting to get it just to where it needed to be done. It's about a 14 by 14 square, and that's about it. So this is the Ba, and this is about the ancient Egyptian beliefs about the afterlife. The Ba is the part of the soul that can travel between the worlds of the living and the dead, but only if it had a body to return to. my main inspirations for this painting was the Book of the Dead, specifically the part of the Papyrus of Ani, which is the picture you see here on the right. And it gave me a fantastic visual about what the Ba should look like. And then my other inspiration for the research side of things was Salima Ikram's book, Death and Burial in Ancient Egypt, which really helped me flesh out what the Ba was and how everything was supposed to look. So this is mine in progress. I had a little bit of trouble with research. I was going through books and websites and videos and everything ancient Egypt you could get your hands on. I was trying to get your hands on to figure out what did an embalming room look like. Turns out there wasn't a room at all. It was a tent. And I was already halfway through the painting by the time I found that out, because I had to start it. It had to start. So in order to kind of correct this mistake, I left the roof open with slats in it so that it could still be ventilated. Because the reason it's a tent is that all the fumes and chemicals from the mummification process were apparently very stinky and very hazardous to health. So they had to have a ventilated room. Other parts of the research that went fun, they have specific jars for your organs to go in when you mummify. Canopic jars they're called, and they hold the lungs, the liver, the intestines, and the stomach, because that's what the ancient Egyptians believed you needed to have when you were dead. So that was very important. And for what went right in this painting, the fire went fantastic. That was so fun to do. Look, again, oil paint is fantastic for layering. And the layering allowed me to get a rich, warm color while still being brighter in the middle and then darker at the edges. And oil paint is also wonderful for blending. So as you can see on the gold sections of the embalming table, that would have been really hard to achieve with almost any other type of paint. Because I would not have been able to get that kind of blending out of, say, acrylic. Some things that went interesting, though, was the linen shelf. So as you can see on the right of the painting, there is a linen shelf. Now, nobody would be able to pick out that that is, in fact, a linen shelf because it just wasn't translating well. And so I took the plunge a couple of weeks ago, and I changed it, and here is the final product. Instead of a linen shelf, I put pots in there because the pots were going to be able to show up better, people would know what they are, and it was going to look better overall and balance out the piece. This is a happy ending, and it's a constellation myth, funny enough. The story goes that Perseus is on his way home from defeating Medusa, and he's flying by on Pegasus when he sees Andromeda chained to a rock with a sea monster going in for an attack. The sea monster is called Cetus. Andromeda is on this rock, chained to this rock, because her parents have sacrificed her to the god Poseidon, because her parents made the mistake of saying that Andromeda and her mother Cassiopeia were more beautiful than Poseidon's Nereids or sea nymphs. That made him very mad, so he demanded a sacrifice. Perseus, while he's flying by, he still has Medusa's head with him for proof that he's defeated her. And the eyes still work, is the big point here. So Perseus gets in front of the sea monster and he turns it to stone. And this is one of the few Greek myths that actually has a happy ending. Perseus and Andromeda go on to live a long life, happy life, they have a lot of kids, and then they die of old age. And their souls get put into the night sky as a constellation. I didn't have any inspiration for this painting. There were no paintings of Perseus and Andromeda that had Andromeda as the right ethnicity, because Andromeda was Ethiopian. And I looked up Ethiopia. They are not white, and they sure aren't blonde either. So, wrong ethnicity, and it made me so mad. So there were no art paintings that made me want to use them as a reference. So instead, I took artistic liberties. So another artistic liberty I took was the sea monster, because some parts of it say that Cetus was a big whale. Some parts of it say that it had legs and kind of a lion-like face. But I chose to go the sea serpent route because it was going to work better in my composition. So what went right? The lighting went fantastic, as well as the scales. I was really pleased with how the scales turned out. That was my first time attempting a large-scale creature, no pun intended. And another thing that went right was the ocean. Professor Fox here has given me wonderful tips about how to paint the ocean, and I managed to get in a lot of waves and a lot of textures that otherwise I wouldn't have been able to do on my own. Some things that went interesting, though, was Perseus. When I was painting him, I got the proportions completely wrong the first time. I mean, it was awful. His arms were all out of whack, the torso was way too big, the head was too small. Like, it was not pretty. So I let it dry, and I went back like a week later, and I managed to get it fixed. I got the arm fixed, and then I had to look up Greek armor, because I figured he's just coming back from battle. He's got to be wearing armor. And that was also fun. However, one other problem that I had during the research is that the older versions of the myth don't include Pegasus. Because they don't include Pegasus, they have him with winged shoes instead. And I did a couple sketchbook pages of that I have not included in this, but are included in my gallery exhibition. These sketches just weren't turning out right, because dynamically, the horse fit better than the winged shoes for positioning, because I don't have to tell you, a guy running around on winged shoes looks kind of ridiculous. So that was also a fun part of the research and the planning. So this is the cause of Ragnarok, and this is what I would like to call the beginning of the end for the Norse gods. So, the god Loki had 3 children with a giantess. One of those children was the wolf Fenrir. And Fenrir was growing at an alarming rate with an appetite to match. So the only god willing to go near him was the god of bravery, Tyr. The gods decided to bind Fenrir with chains, but their first 2 attempts failed miserably. He snapped them like they were twigs. And they then decided to make a rope made of impossible things. The beard of a woman, the spittle of a bird, the footsteps of a cat, things like that. It was a very strange list of impossible things. They then decided to have a sports day where they go out and they compete and they'd have a nice day out. Well, this sports day decided to have a sporting event where they bind Fenrir with this rope that was made of impossible things, thinking surely this will work. Now Fenrir, he's suspicious because they're way too pleased about this plan. And he says that the only way he's trying that rope is if a god is willing to put his arm in his mouth in case of a betrayal. Because he figures if they're going to betray me, they got to lose an arm to do it. The only god willing to volunteer for that was Tyr. And so Tyr volunteers, he binds Fenrir, and when Fenrir can't escape and nobody tries to release him, off Tyr's hand goes. And Tyr loses a hand and Fenrir loses his only friend, which is what makes it a betrayal, honestly. So my inspirations for this were John Bauer and his 1911 depiction of Tyr and Fenrir. It's a very dark composition. Fenrir is in a very defensive position for a wolf, and Tyr looks very resigned. It's a very resigned piece overall. And then my other inspiration is Neil Gaiman in his book Norse Mythology, because he had a wonderful rendition of how the story goes, where it said that if the gods hadn't decided to bind Fenrir, they might have actually had an ally at Ragnarok instead of an enemy. So this in progress slide was a bit different because I figured I'd focus on sketchbook work, because sketchbook work was an important part of this process and in developing the image. So when I was researching things, I'd need to sketch things out, like what does a Norse god wear? I had to look up what did Vikings around that time wear. Turns out it's tunics with cloaks and then pants, and a shield on the right arm, and you got a sword because you're a Viking warrior. So that was fun. It turns out red was an acceptable color to put on somebody's cloak. So I figured red would be perfect for Tyr's cloak. And then I had to look up defensive wolf postures as well, because you can't have a picture like this without him looking a little like he's worried about it. And you'll notice that Tyr in this sketchbook is having his left arm bitten off. I cannot stress enough the importance of research and knowing right from left, as I didn't when I was doing these sketchbook pages, because the arm that gets eaten is the right arm. As you can see, I managed to fix that before I started the painting. So, things that went right here were, Professor Fox got a new selection of brushes that were perfect for doing fur and grassy textures and stuff like that. So that was really helpful in the front part of the painting. The rocks went fantastic, and then the defensive position of Fenrir went wonderful. I did choose to have the rope be a slightly blue color because it doesn't necessarily say in the myth what the rope is, other than it's thin and silky. So I didn't know if it had color, so I decided on light blue. And as for the mountains, I wasn't completely pleased with them, but they did end up looking all right for what I was going for. Now this is a 2-for-1 special on world turtles. So the first world turtle myth is a Hindu myth of cosmology, which is how they believe the world exists in the universe. And the belief is that the world is on the back of 4 elephants that represent the 4 cardinal directions. And then on the elephants stand on the back of a turtle called Akipara, who then floats around in space or in an ocean or on more turtles. Depends on who you ask in Hindu mythology, because it's a little disconjointed when you go in for research. As for the Native American myth about a world turtle, it begins with the fall of a pregnant woman from an island in the sky. And the animals below this island in the sky notice that there's a lady falling from the sky, and they quickly convene a rescue plan. They have birds go and catch her, and then while the birds are doing that, they have the more aquatic animals dive down into the bottom of the ocean to find dirt to put on the back of the turtle so that the woman has a place to live. And as they do this, the turtle grows bigger and bigger until eventually it becomes the American continent, which is why some Native American tribes still call North and South America Turtle Island. As for inspirations, this is the picture of Hindu Earth from 1877 from the popular Science Monthly magazine. So this is my in progress for Turtle Island, and as you'll be able to see in the next slide, these 2 pieces were meant to be seen as kind of mirror images of each other. But some questions I didn't know I'd have to ask myself. How do you describe birds catching a falling pregnant woman? So I gave it my best shot, and so they're carrying her by the arms and the dress. And then another question I didn't know I'd have to ask myself was, how do you put an island on the back of a turtle? So I also gave that my best shot, and that looks a lot better in the final product, as we'll see in a couple of slides. One of the issues that I had was I didn't foreshorten the back of the turtle correctly. So in the left slide, you can see that the turtle is very different from the more finished one on the right. And it's because I needed to expand the turtle shell so that it actually looked like it was floating in the water and not just laying there. This is in progress for Akipara, and as you can see, I started off with a very, very simple sketch. It didn't even have the elephants on it, and eventually I was able to get the elephants in there, but I was having trouble with the elephants because I couldn't decide how to make them have the kind of the volume and depth that I wanted. So Professor Fox suggested add blue, and I was like, add blue? And so I added blue, and lo and behold, it turned out wonderful once we get there. Other things that went right with Akipara were I feel like the stars that you'll see in a minute went really well. And then I was really pleased with how the turtle ended up in the first place. It was the first painting in this series that I felt was the most complete before I did my last edits. So this is both of them, and as you can see, they're mirror images because one turtle is facing away from you and the other turtle is facing towards you. They're meant to be seen together as kind of a reference to both being a world turtle myth. So as you can see, I added in the stars and the blue to the elephants, and that turned out wonderful. And then I adjusted the positioning of the pregnant woman so that she didn't look quite so awkward while falling. So honestly, that was never going to be a comfortable situation. And then this is my last piece, and this is yomi, and that is the word for the Japanese underworld. So this myth is the first instance of death in Japanese mythology. The story goes that the goddess Izanami dies while giving birth to a fire demon, and her husband, the god Izanagi, decides he's going to go to the underworld and say, please come back with me. So he goes and he tries to convince her, and he happens to catch a glimpse of her while they're there, and notices that she's decomposing badly. Like, it's not a pretty sight, and he starts fleeing in terror. Now Izanami, she's mad, because he came all the way here for her, only to flee when looking at her. That is not true love. So she's hot on his tail as he's fleeing out of the underworld, and he finds a very large stone, and he seals up the entrance. And while he seals up the entrance, he and Izanami start to have a fight, and this fight goes like she promises to kill 1,000 beings, while he promises that 1,500 more will be born, which is the precedent for life always overcoming death in Japanese mythology. So this is another one of those paintings where the importance of research really can't be overstated. Always make sure that they don't have a real-life location for this, guys, because the Japanese do have a real-life location for this and a real-life rock. And it's a hole in the ground sealed up by a rock. Now, I was already halfway through the painting when I found this out, so I adjusted for this by taking some artistic liberties and making the rock in the painting the same shape as the rock that's in the real life. So, some things that went right on this painting. I loved how the cave turned out. I almost had to change nothing on the cave from when I got that side of it done. My main problem was the greenery and forested area. I had some trouble with that. Luckily, I once again had that greenery brush that was very useful, and then there were some fan brushes that helped get the textures for the trees in the background. And I was really pleased with how the body language looks, because they look both sad and angry at each other. And you can really tell that it's not a happy scene between the two of them. And if you look closely, you can see that she is in fact decomposing. Her clothes are not seeing the best of state, but you can see pieces of bone through her leg and through her arm. And that also went really well. Does anybody have any questions? Yes.